like it is just my greatest joy always to share space with you, Nezzy, and I miss you so much. And so I'm just happy to be to get to like be in conversation over the Zoomy Zooms. It's just like old times in verses. But anyway, so I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you. I guess, yeah, I'll jump in and I'll read for about 10 minutes and then we'll talk. Cool. So as a point of intro, this book, The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On, is a book that I started writing in the sort of depths of despair, to just like put it plainly. And it was in this moment where it seemed like the only option that I could see ahead of me, ahead of us, was the end of things, was the end of the world, that there was no other path forward for us as like people, as a planet. And it was in that moment that my partner, who is very smart and much more well-read than I am, quoted a line from an essay about Afrofuturism and said, it might be helpful to remember that the apocalypse happened a long time ago, and that we and our people have long been surviving it. And that was helpful. And that was sort of the impetus for this poem, which kind of became the impetus for the book. So this poem is called The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of boats, boats of prisoners, boats cracking under sky iron, boats making corpses bloom like algae on the shore. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of the bombed mosque. There was the apocalypse of the taxi driver warped by flame. There was the apocalypse of the leaving and the having left, of my mother unsticking herself from her mother's grave as the plane barreled down the runway. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of planes. There was the apocalypse of pipelines, legislating their way through sacred water, and the apocalypse of the dogs, before which was the apocalypse of the dogs and the hoses, before which the apocalypse of dogs and slave catchers whose faces glowed by lantern light. Before the apocalypse of bees, the apocalypse of buses, border fence apocalypse, coat hanger apocalypse, apocalypse in the textbook's selective silences. There was the apocalypse of the settlement and the soda machine, the apocalypse of the settlement and the jars of scalps. There was the bedlam of the cannery, the radioactive rain, the chairless martyr demanding a name. I was born from an apocalypse and have come to tell you what I know, which is that the apocalypse began when Columbus praised God and lowered his anchor. It began when a continent was drawn into cutlets. It began when Kublai Khan told Marco, begin at the beginning. By the time the apocalypse began, the world had already ended. It ended every day for a century or two. It ended and another ending world spun in its place. It ended and we woke up and ordered Greek coffees, drew the hot liquid through our teeth as everywhere the apocalypse rumbled, the apocalypse remembered, our dear, beloved apocalypse. It drifted slowly from the trees all around us, so loud we finally stopped hearing it. There's something really amazing about reading these poems in the presence of my dear friend Danez, and remembering just like moments when you were like present, like memories that we would like shared together, because you were there for so much of the writing of this book. It is what it is. This is a poem that feels present in the worst way to me this week. Also, I saw that y'all are like going off camera, coming on camera, and I just want to like say into the air that you should do exactly what feels comfortable to you to do, and just like name that. All right, cool.
I didn't know if we were supposed to disappear and let the light be on you, but I don't know.
You should do exactly what you want. You should do exactly what you want.
I'll show you my listening.
Okay, yeah, no, I love it. All right. Yes, this poem is called "It Is What It Is." And yeah, the events of this poem are weighing on me this week. I'll say that. Each morning, on her way to make a living, my mother passes that business, now closed, where I've tried not to think of it. A man killed 3 Korean mothers just like mine. Her voice echoes heavy into the tunnel between us. What am I supposed to do? Be afraid? What am I supposed to do? In the tunnel between us, her voice echoes heavy just like mine. A man killed 3 Korean mothers. I've tried not to think of it. That business now closed. Where to make a life? My mother passes each morning on her way. This one I wanted to read because Danez is in the title. It's called Danez Says They Want to Lose Themselves in Bops They Can't Sing Along To. Danez says they want to lose themselves in bops they can't sing along to. And I'm thinking of the years I spent sweating to the choreo of every K-pop song with a decent dance break, me and the other girls from church, practically saintly in our diligence as we rehearsed our isolations and body rolls, and rewinding the tapes, our noses nearly grazing the screen, though in truth, I only understood maybe about half the words. The other half, mostly sounds, which nevertheless sank into my muscles, pathways laid by so many hours of industrious mouthing that now, while humming idly some stupid tune at the sink, I'll realize for the first time ever what that line meant. Though, of course, pop everywhere's a language so reliable it's nearly nothing. Baby, let me know, and I need you in my arms on babbling loop through the ages. And I'm thinking, too, about how this, my first love of losing myself in the scaffolds and percussives of an unparsed lyric, doomed me for life to never be able to actually hear the words to any songs, even in English, even my favorites, like Jamila's, which I put on when I'm adrift and sunken and just need to feel at home in something. Even those harbors are built mostly of sonics, not gibberish, I mean, but language so sacred, it's not my place to try to decipher it. Phonemes holy as stones on a string, mysterious as the names we give to animals or words we know only in prayer. At Rebecca's mother's funeral, for example, where, when invited, I added my small voice to the reciting of the Kaddish, and the perfect thunder of it lifted one part of me higher than air, while rooting another deep into the fragrant earth, a bit of which I later scooped as gently as I could bear onto the casket, the shovel heavier than any word I knew, and more full of light than even the birds overhead, who, as we wept, kept, of course, right on, saying exactly whatever they needed to say. I think that I'll read, if I read 2 more, that seems like about right? Okay, I'm gonna read 2 more. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like so much of these poems, especially in that first section, are like me grappling with like the impossibility of even describing something like an experience of grief or loss, or an experience of just like watching the news. And that kind of like wordlessness I have been feeling also this past week, seeing the news out of Atlanta. And so I wanted to read this poem, which is called Rememory. And it takes place in a few cities and in a few times. But one of the times that it takes place in is in Atlanta, I think in 2015, after like a non-indictment verdict came out, and I happened to be home, and there was a protest that happened downtown that I joined. So that's one of the memories of this poem, Rememory. Atlanta, Seoul, Gwangju. Whose story was I remembering when riot cops closed in on all 4 sides and a sound happened from somehow me? The sound was a sound from 1980, Year my father was a young man. Year of bayonets. Year of soldiers shooting into crowds, limbs on fire. My father was a student of biology in another year of martial law, in a century of war, bayonet of interruption. My father touched diagrams, threw rocks at riot gear, and wondered what for. It was another year when they shut the school gates and students died in the street. The crowds were gassed and ran, choking from the scene. This year, someone else's father is a young man, choking, and the crowds are gassed, and we run, boots on the ground. I remember this night, this year, no root out of the cops' kettle, me in the crowd shouting Americanly until the cops study forward with their shields and fists, and then someone unremembered inside me is wailing, wailing, someone else's song, crawling backwards from my mouth. Whose song? Hell of looking, bodies in a heap, mother shrieks in white hemp, boots on the ground, boots on the bloody ground. Whose voice was that? Whose year is it? Whose streets? This city, this hour, slow bayonet of claiming, whose tank in my mouth? Bayonet of this, American me, fathering nothing but the wails of strangers I'll never caress. Bayonet of dispersal, gas, we run, choking on the sound of century and centuries return. I run, and a country breaks its way out of me, then breaks. And then just to close out, I thought I would read one short one that's after a poem by our dear friend Nate Marshall. And it's a poem that takes place far in the future, maybe not too far, but after the institution of police and among other institutions have been abolished. And it's sort of looking back and explaining how we got there. A little bit of the answer to the question, how did you get there? On how. We wrote new chants and bailed folks out and plate scooped meals and healed old wounds and walked cold blocks and drummed up, stumped, and stole back land and claimed back facts and sowed loud flags and sowed right crops and cut cops cash and heaved gold rot and let go ghosts and surged road crests and spread wealth flat and clawed down walls and learned harm and nixed cruel laws and crowd-sourced grace and ground teeth down and laid cards flat and dug toward hope and sang off key and worked through shit and took sweet time and pre-lived worlds and dreamed past doom and walked, fell, walked, fell, walked, fell, walked. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening.
Incredible, as always.
Oh, baby.
You're so good.
Nancy, I love you so much.
I love you too. I'm not gonna cry tonight because I cried reading this book before and I cried rereading it the other day. So I'm so I'll hold my feelings inside. And thank you. Also, I just want to give a shout out to Shady for just like setting up such an amazing space for us and making us feel very welcome. So thank you. Okay, so I want to go back to big hearts. I want to go back to your introduction, Franny, that you gave before the reading, when you said basically that you started from a place of despair, and because of a moment with your lover, with your boo, I think what has happened is a collection that that doesn't submit to the pessimism of thinking about the apocalypse. Right. And I think it kind of fits you as a person too. I would call you a reluctant optimist, or maybe not reluctant, skeptical optimist. Like, I'm down for the light. I have some questions. And And I think this book really captures that side of you in a way, because it doesn't give in to the despair of apocalypse after apocalypse. Sure, there is a necessary grief floating in the poems, but I think it is still so pulsing with love when you read this collection. And I think that says a lot about you. I wanted to know, just to open this up, how does love figure into your practice as a writer and as an organizer? How does it augment what you do, or how does it sustain the work that you see yourself doing both on the page and in the world?
God, that's such a good question. And it's such a question that's like on brand for you and for us. I feel, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll just, yeah. Well, okay. What I was about to say was, I will never forget that time. I think I've talked about this like recently in some sort of interview or something as well, but I will never ever forget that time that Dark Noise did a reading, and it was like the most joyful, beautiful, like loving, hour of poems. And then the first question that came out the gate was like, somebody was like, where does your anger come from? Like, what do you do with all this anger that these angry poems or something? And we were all like, what? I mean, like, yes, of course we're raging, but that's not what was happening right now. Like, what was happening is, or like that, any rage that you might sense is actually rooted always in like a deep and abiding love that we have for each other and for our people, when like our people being, I think, like very wide, like anybody who like chooses us as their people, you know what I mean? Like it's like it's a chosen sort of like a chosen people, not like a chosen people, but a chosen people, but so I guess that is like the connection there, that anything that seems like grief, that seems like despair, that seems like terror, or anxiety, that like remembering that all of that is rooted actually in love, like that the reason I'm so terrified of what's happening around me is because I'm so in love with the world, and that I think like keeps me kind of like sort of like tethered to the earth in some ways, like remembering that that's what it's about. But it also, I think, like keeps me feeling accountable to those people that I'm thinking about, and then also kind of like to the future as well. If I say the world is ending, like we're all fucked and it's over, then that is kind of disavowing a responsibility that I have to current people and also to future people, but and so like to believe that the world goes on is also like, to me, it's like a standing in like holding on really tightly to that love that I have, that responsibility that I have to the future world, like that is the thing that keeps me actually from saying there is no hope. Like it's not an option that there is no hope if I think of myself as being accountable to people who are alive next year, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's I mean, it's kind of a craft question, to say like that nothing matters is just not good enough in the poem, like that fighting for something, like to keep coming back to that is like a craft challenge, I think.
Do you, speaking in craft, do you remember a poem or maybe a moment in your life of you learning that lesson of maybe you were running into the wall with like sort of despair in a work? Or are there writers or movement leaders or people in your life who you feel like have helped exemplify and solidify that lesson for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is kind of the thing about organizers, and like about seeing that, thinking of myself as being in community with organizers. It's like if like it's easy to in some ways to say like, we're all fucked if that's not your job to make sure we're not, like I think I find so much inspiration from the way that folks who are working on the ground are able to kind of toe that line to be like, this is the reality of the enormity of what we're up against. And also, we literally can't get out of bed in the morning unless we can believe that there is something worth fighting for here, and that we have a shot, and that like, yeah, that like that force that compels us to act is actually like an incredibly powerful force that can move mountains. So I feel like it's like looking, it's like anytime I see somebody who's organized, an organizer, like give like an actually like really great speech at a rally, I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like get to the page, get to the, like the action or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. Wait, can you say the question again, Nezzy? I feel like
No, I think that was spot on. I was just asking like where do those like where people in your life or spaces in your life have helped solidify that idea of what we're talking about, right? Which is love. And I think Miriam Kava's coming to my mind too, about having like insisting upon a practice of hope within the work, right? Within movement work, right? You cannot be an abolitionist of any kind without hope, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that it's palpable in the book, and I'm what I'm hearing from you also is that that necessity of thinking about hope as practice, as like believing that there is another destination that is better. What we have to be on the ground, that your poems are rather on the ground in that way, right? That like even within the framework of poetry, these poems are on the ground in that way, right? Where like there's no utility for you in sending your dreamer or your reader, sorry, to a dream or to a world that ends.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I mean, I also that line of Miriam Kava's is so I just like cling to it every night of my life, I mean, but also because like that word discipline is so great because it implies that it's freaking hard, that like it's something that you fight for and that you show up to again and again and again, like despite the fact that it's hard, like even despite the fact that it doesn't work, like, and we know that as poets that you write and you write and you write, and like a lot of the times it's not going to work, and you just like come back to the page again and again anyway. And like to think about that as the way that one might engage with hope is really it makes it sort of like a tangible practice that anybody can engage in, and also kind of like helps me remember that like if hope is easy, then I'm probably not doing it right. You know what I mean? Like if it's easy to just like be like, oh, it'll be fine, then like probably I'm not actually engaging with it to the best of my ability. Yeah, which is the same kind of thing that happens in the poem, right? But like, and I think that actually this is the thing that I kind of wanted to say before, is that like there was a moment when I realized that all of my poems, and I think it was kind of like towards the end of writing Soft Science, that all of my poems were kind of ending in a like, and that's why I'm so fucked up like moment, like and wasn't that the moment where my heart, something was destroyed, or like, and I was like, oh, it's becoming easy. It's becoming easy to rest in this like shame, actually. And that like I need some discipline in order to practice getting out of it.
Oof, that was a word for me. You don't even know.
I mean, right? Like, oof, yeah.
It is. In that vein, I think that's a nice transition. I guess what were cautions that you had for yourself, or compasses that you had for yourself through working your way, not only through grief and despair, which I think grief has such a huge and named presence in the book, right? So I guess how did you or did you find yourself doing anything in the editing process or in the writing process to sort of buoy yourself amongst that grief, or to like, still keep the book sort of pointed towards that hope? And I want to know particularly, did you have any things, because I've been talking to a lot of younger writers who are working with like how to ethically involve other people's stories within their work, right? And I think there's a lot of your people are in these poems, right? Both named, and also you're diving into stories, right? Histories that maybe you live alongside but are not yours. And I guess how do you caution, or just like not maybe caution is not the right word, but sort of what what tools or ethics do you hold on to when diving into the end of, right? We're thinking about apocalypse. How do you write about the end of somebody else's world? Justice.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a good question. And I really appreciate you asking it, because it is thorny and it is hard. And like that has been one of the, I think that walking that line of engaging in other people's stories, the ends of other people's worlds, as you say, has been like, I would say like the single hardest thing, part of writing this book. You know, there's a poem about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's a poem about that's just, if not answering the question, but asking the question of what does it mean to be an immigrant and also a settler on native land. And like, you know, for my family story to begin at the end of a genocidal history. You know, and then there's poems that are like trying to reach in something kind of like solidarity, but maybe more accurately just something like love toward just toward other people. I'm like, not, if somebody wrote to me and said, here are all the ways that you did it wrong, I would be completely open to reading that letter, you know what I mean? Because I'm not under any sort of like delusion that I just got it all perfectly. But I do know that a few things that helped me kind of try to be a compass, as you say, in walking that path. One was just like trying to have lots of conversations with friends and to understand that like I'm writing these poems not about like people who have no relation to my life at all, you know what I mean? Like I think that I would like personally side-eye somebody who was like writing about like my people suffering, but I was like, I've never seen you being in any kind of community with my people, you know, like I'd be like, what is happening, like what is kind of motivating that, right? And so I think that like I had to kind of on the one hand understand that like that relationship building, like my friendships, my chosen family, but at the end of the day, that's actually what I'm writing about. Like I'm writing about the fact that like I love the people around me. I love like my chosen siblings, and that it's like building that and kind of saying what is the larger story that is a part of. And then also like, but by that I also mean that like I don't know, there were certain poems where I was writing them and I was thinking just like, what would Danez think about like this poem? Like what would Jamila think about this poem? What would Eve think about this poem? What would Sarah think about this poem? And then sometimes I would like send the poem to that person, but oftentimes it was enough, I think, to just kind of like hold folks in mind and be like, or even like my mom, like what would my mom think about this poem about like an experience that's more related to her experience than mine, you know? And so that helped too. I literally have I'm going to show you, I'm going to flash this so that you can't see it. But like,
yes, behind the scenes, come
on. I'm going to move it around so people don't screenshot it, but there's a picture of it's a list of basically, the title at the top is people whose opinions about my book I care about. And it's like probably like 100 names or something, and of just people who like these are the people I'm talking to, and these are like the hearts that I'm trying not to break, you know, and these are the hearts that I'm trying to appeal to. And if these 100 hearts aren't broken, like then I can live with that, you know.
Wow, I love that list, but also for the folks been watching before, that's an old Verses throwback, that practice, because we learned that from Eve in the very first episode of Verses ever.
Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, or maybe you've been doing it before, but Eve talked about, I think it was in that episode, or maybe it was a different conversation with Eve. I know Eve does that same practice. Eve,
really?
who you named as like somebody you held in mind. But yeah, I remember, I think it was on our podcast where she talked about like having this list of like, this is who matters about my book. And so like, it's a way to like, even like prepare yourself for like the bad review and this other sort of things, right? It's just like, it wasn't this person, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, maybe stole it from Eve. I would not be surprised if I stole something that I thought was like cool and smart if I actually stole it from Eve.
We did too many we did all those interviews. They just
we did a lot of interviews. Yeah. But I also think like I think that if you're doing solidarity work of any kind, like you have to be prepared to learn that you have in fact fucked up. You know what I mean? And so like I think that was a part of the process too, just being like, if I mess up here, like I'm going to try to prepare myself to learn from that process, you know? So,
yeah. I mean, you can't have a writing practice if sometimes practice goes wrong, right?
Practice goes wrong. Yeah.
You fuck up in practice, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's a good maybe note, Franny, to read a couple more poems. So I was wondering if you would read 2 poems from the series of poems titled Upon Learning That Some Korean War Refugees Used Partially Detonated Napalm Canisters as Cooking Fuel.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just read like the first and the last poem in that series.
Yeah, great.
Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And the first one, there's a note in the back about this, but this first one owes its life to Lucille Clifton. I mean, most of my poems owe their lives to Lucille Clifton, but this one definitely. Upon learning that some Korean War refugees used partially detonated napalm canisters as cooking fuel. Somewhere in a prior world, a woman with my face is scraping the seeds from an unborn hell. All night, doom rang from the sky, and in the morning, there are mouths to feed. There are crocks in the cellar and the ruined crops, the early frost, the neighbor's red daughter strung up in the square. What else to do when the unspeakable comes? What to burn when it doesn't? Somewhere in a world that didn't quite end, a woman like me is foraging for that which failed to kill her. She is cranking open modernity's throat, wrenching her arc from its scat. She is a woman who can hack an impossible morning into water, bean paste, bitter leaves, another chance to fumble toward the next chance and the next. Every day of my life has been something other than my last. Every day, an extinction misfires, and I put it to work. And then I'll read the last one. Upon learning that some Korean War refugees used partially detonated napalm canisters as cooking fuel. I lie on the floor, partially bursting, partially stripped by the fact, drowning in the fact, slobbering like a dog in the heat of the fact. Here on the other side of what happened, I make nothing happen. Nothing, flaccid as gerund, dead trees sharpening the sky. Once upon a time, the people whose nightmares I inherited were safe. Then they weren't. Hence, they were never safe. They survived however they could. They made daughters who married well and were proud in ordinary ways, or they were ashamed. Days passed. They chased vultures from their mothers, were stuffed with bloody rags, watched fire shock their limbs into myth, days and days. Here, in the inconceivable future, I am unable to narrate, to speak in the simple past. Facts lined up like soldiers on a horizon. I'm making nothing happen but my own drooling, gaping, chomping at the ing. I make a nothing that whirs into being, feedback looping into a buzzsaw of nothing, dome of nothing, so big it rises, big enough to keep my people safe from the catastrophes that rain from planes. Before each catastrophe, a moment in which my people are safe. Refuge of nothing, refuge of uneventfulness, first days, then days and days. In a dead tree's heart, an empty space. In the space, a small animal, useless, beautiful animal stretching its wings.
Wow, so incredible. So if you if you're good for our book club, then you already know that there's four of those poems back to back in the book. And I'm wondering, this is a very nerdy question, nerdy craft question coming. Why the choice to have all four separately titled and under that same title presented? Because you're not shy from the long poem, right? There are other poems in the book that are mini sectioned. And so what was it about the gravity of this event and of writing these poems that felt like they had to be separate entries in the collection?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Is this what it's like to be on Versus? Is this what
No, I think it's because I don't do drugs no more, so I'm a little clear. I don't think I was
nice.
on Versus.
Ooh, that's also good. Wow, the new crew 2.0, probably like 7.0.
It was like what it was like for you hosting Versus, not me. There.
No, you were always amazing. You were yeah. You were the Ernie to my Bert. But yeah, I think I love that question because it was really like, it was like I encountered this fact while reading Grace Cho's book, Haunting the Korean Diaspora. And I just like, it just sort of like stopped me in my tracks, you know, like sometimes you just like come across, like it was just kind of like a throwaway, like factoid. And I was just like, I can't move on from this. Like I'm too struck by it. And so I was just like, I won't move on from it. Like I won't get over it. And so I think I just decided not to get over it and to just like keep writing about it, because that was what the experience had been like for me. And there was so much there's so many lessons in that. And like including some lessons that were not necessarily like neat lessons, or like that maybe were like the wrong lessons to learn, you know. And so I just needed to, I just couldn't move on from it. And I think that there's something about like re-encountering that title, especially like because it's a long title over and over again, that I think that I ended up like contributing to that sense of just like getting stuck on it. It's like a glitch, you know, a glitch in the system or something. Like it buffers at that moment. And so whereas I think if it had been all one long poem, it wouldn't exactly have that same effect, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it achieved that. It was like you're flipping the page and you're just like, oh, again and again and again, you know, to have to sit in that fact. I love that you mentioned glitch. I think that's a great transition, because I want to talk about soft science and floating brilliant a little bit. So soft science, your previous collection was so driven by persona, by code, by the machine, right? Being inspired by Deus, or not Deus Ex Machina, but Ex Machina, and by experiment. And I think this book in many ways actually feels closer to some of the tonalities and concerns of Floating Brilliant Gone, but rather magnified and being like, motherfucker, this how I write now. Better now. Right. So magnified and transformed. I was wondering for each collection, what they taught you, and if at all, how they informed making this new collection.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I've been thinking about this book as kind of like the book where my different sort of poet selves have been able to come together in a way, you know, and I think that we've sort of talked about this, that like, excuse me, well, I'm the one that's burping. That in Floating Brilliant Gone, I felt I really wrote that book like for myself first and foremost, but also like for to talk to people, you know. And that was also, I was like, it was when I was deep in organizing was when I wrote that book. And I like was really thinking about poetry as a political practice, and like wanted to sort of like speak directly to things and like be understood in like a kind of intense way. And then in soft science, I felt like what I really wanted to do was like explore at the far end of my craft and my abilities and my imagination. So I think I was just trying to write like the most imaginative, weird, like craft heavy poems that I could. It's just like trying to write like the best poems of my life, basically. And like trying to get into like the really thorny particulars the thing, like the complications of it, and to not give any easy answers. Like I think that Floating Brilliant Gone, I think it's a probably, I think, a more complicated book than I give it credit for, but I think that I was really invested in the like big easy answer in some ways in that book. And I think that this is a book where these sort of like halves are able to kind of come together, where like there's there I'm still trying to write like the best poems that I can, and like operate at the far end of my imagination, but I'm also, this is not a book, I'm not thinking of it as a book that's trying to impress anyone or even necessarily make a theory in the same way. Like it's a book where I'm trying to talk to people. I'm trying to say like, it sucks to be here right now. It's so confusing, it's so exhausting every single day. How are we going to make it out of here? And to like talk, to start from there, and to like have a conversation. So yeah, I mean, I think that like the lesson from soft science that I carried over was that I learned a lot from writing that book, and I love that book. And I also felt there was a kind of loneliness, I think, that I ended up feeling at the end of the kind of like season of that book. Like, I don't know, I think I just like missed talking to people in a particular way, and I don't know, I missed people, I guess. I'm not saying like nobody read the book or anything, and I think I
definitely, yeah, I think,
but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think because the book, it has such a laser sharp focus on where it's going. And like, I don't think it is. I think you're right. It's not necessarily interested in, and maybe I think even like the machine, you know, and the character, it's Kamiko, right? As a character. I mean, one, I think it's kind of interesting to talk about like feeling lonely and the loneliness of that character, the loneliness of the AI mind. But but you know, I think it wasn't, and we talked about this, you know, it was a flex, you know, I think that's what we kept on saying, like, right, this book is like a flex in a way of like, a flex doesn't concern itself with who else is in the room, right? And I think that's what I hear you kind of saying a little bit, right? Where this poem, right, you're still trying to write the best, but I think I'm going to write it down somewhere so I can see it all the time, to communicate with others from like the furthest reaches of your imagination, of your obsession. That is a really cool way to think about poetry. And I think is maybe the definition of like what, like my favorite definition of like what a really good poem is. So thank you for that so much. Because I think well, just as your friend, I'll say I think you did that with this collection, right? I think I feel the muscularity and the intellect that I've come to know from you and your use of language, and I also feel not even just because I'm named in it, but I also feel how this book is reaching towards people, and really fantastically tugging on the heartstrings. And it's a book that I think about in conversation with Claire Schultz's Silver Service, the work of Dion Brand, the work of June Jordan, and all these poets that are using powerful intellect to engineer and pull us towards a better world. So thank you for adding this brilliant entry to that archive of women poets trying to get us to be better, that are calling this better word forward. Yeah.
Yes, wow. Thank you for saying that. All makes me, in the words of the legendary Ajane Dawkins, it makes my heart smile, you know. And it also it means a lot. It means a lot coming from you for like so many different reasons. One being that you have been one of my favorite, you know, like you've been like the beacon of writing. I mean, I think that we've been like each other's beacons, you know, and so like it means so much for that reason, but also because, yeah, I don't know, like I think that we met the year that we met, we were both like working on our first books, or maybe our first books had like just come out,
They
or
just got accepted.
They had just gotten accepted, you know? And so like, I don't know. I I love Insert Boy. You know what I mean? Like I love Hand Look Knees. Like I love those poems, and I love also like the arc of your growth as a poet, and like like our sort of like co-arcs, you know. So I don't know, I'm just babbling, but I'm really emotional and I love you.
I love you. All right, so looking at the time, I think let's both read one more poem and then we'll kick it out to the Q&A. So folks, if you're watching, ready your questions, you know, put them in the chat and they will get to us, and we'll be sure to get to as many as we can. I'm going to read a poem real quick, and then Franny will read us one final poem. So this poem is hot off the presses, or it's still in the notes app, and I wrote it yesterday on a plane. Yesterday on a plane? What's today? Thursday? Tuesday on a plane. Cool. It's after June Jordan, and it mentions Franny. I wrote this because I finished your book, my reread of the book, and I just needed to write, and so this is what came. It's about a day we share with each other. The day the city council announced they would defund the police, I called Franny weeping with joy. Wasted salt, fool's water. Oh, after June Jordan, by the way. Wasted salt, fool's water, a dried up at last on my face, parched maps to never. The tears, a libation to nothing. It felt good to hope, to feel near hope's final plateau, from sea to sea and on TV, defund, and more money poured into the banks of the federations of those bulleted blue brothers of control. Tanks for them, new stations, a city to rehearse torture. We chanted no more, but our spells didn't stick. They filled child after child with lead funding, engineered stale wars with new weapons made of sound and light and rubber, and stop. I called my friend when someone said the future out loud. I called her to tell her I heard the seed, the seed, the seed. Let there be water and, of course, light.
Oh, you made me cry.
Oh, yay! Okay, that's a good poem. This is.
No, that's
No, I love
you.
Secretly behind the scenes, this is how I know if a poem's doing a thing. Franny will cry.
Oh God. Oh, Nezzy, I love you so much. That was
Love
so
you too.
good. Oh God. Hey, I want to talk about that poem for hours, but I guess we got people.
Yeah,
We have company.
no company. No company. Well, we got hours ahead of us, but you read a poem and then we'll talk to the peoples.
Yeah, I'll read a poem. God, I love that so much. It's going in the new book, right?
It hasn't yet because it's still in the note doc, but it will.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
This one is called Look. My mother, very Catholic, loves that song. Imagine there's no heaven. Can you picture it? My mother joining the chorus of her 3 churchless children to croon, no heaven, no hell, nothing before or after. Above us, only the universe and its borderless yawn. Only the trees who died for my handwriting, history's pollen, fields and field hands I can't stop robbing with money. Today, I woke up on still stolen land, then scrolled through the latest debris of people attempting godliness in 100 wrong ways. The room was filled today with light, filled, you could say, with nothing. No hope, no glory, no such peach as an ethical peach. The minute I started wanting paradise, it leapt from my belief. I'm not good enough to survive not being good. I'm like you, still drooling after a perfect world, even as the stars warble off key and the oceans rattle with plastics. Imagine, I can't stop saying. Imagine, I beg, when I should have said, look, look. Paradise is both a particle and a wave. You don't have to believe in something for it to startle you awake.
Oof. I love that poem. I love all your poems.
Poems, right?
Poems.
Cool.
This is so absolutely beautiful, both of you. Thank you so much. And there is such an outpouring of love in the comments here. So I want to share some of these with you. First, we have an onslaught of hearts, and you're inspiring, and thank you from our audience. So just wanted to, we've got an I am crying. That's, and as you said, a good indication. uh, I'll go in, down the questions from earliest to latest. So Evie asks, what does your writing process look like if you have one? How long does it usually take for you to write a poem from conception to revision / sending to journals?
Yeah, great question. For me, I often, there's that, I think it's like maybe it's like a Hemingway quote where he says like, write drunk, edit sober. And it's not, I don't follow that to a T or anything, but I do think that I try to write in a state where like the veil is thin in some way, so usually that's just like late at night. Or really early in the morning, and then edit when I feel like I have like some more of my wits about me. And by editing, I really just mean like taking the thing. Well, there's 2 rounds of editing. The first round being like taking the kind of messy thing and then like putting it into some sort of shape. So usually transferring from writing by hand into a shape the next morning or something. And then there's the many rounds of revision that happen after that. And for this book, especially, the way that revision happened was often I would not like just take the draft and kind of like tinker with it, like change a line break here, like, cut a word here or whatever, but actually just start from the top and rewrite the poem all the way through, like sort of put that poem away and just start from the top and see what happens again. And it was because I wanted to try to preserve, I mean, this has been the antidote to that I have found that works for kind of preserving rhythm and musicality in the editing process, because otherwise like things just start to get off if I just go in like partway through and tinker. But then also I think that a lot of times I was trying to like find the poem more than write the poem, like find my, like I had this beginning of the idea or like a vague sense, but I needed to go in like 17 different directions in order to sort of like find it. So this was a book where I like rewrote like completely new drafts way more than I ever have before. Like I feel like I probably wrote this book 3 times in the process of writing it. Yeah. Lizzie, what about you? Do you want to answer it too?
The question was about just editing, right?
Writing, editing process, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, my writing process, I like what you said, Franny, about writing where the veil is thin. When I'm a little bit more disciplined about my practice, which I have to be at sometimes if it won't come, then I also tend to try to write like first thing in the morning, later at night when sort of like, kind of, when I say I don't have a brain, that's actually like great, because I'm a little bit less about my wits, or even in the afternoon, or like, in the afternoon, because I think I'm also a little sleepy in the afternoon, but also just because the light is then best. And so I like to go by a window and like, I don't know, like there's like a thing between like light, serotonin, and the writing hand. I think where I write too also keeps the veil thin. So most of my first drafts happen by hand, or in my notes app on the phone, because I think those are the 2 places where I feel less formal about the words happening. And so I think I'm less I think, the computer is a little bit too final for me. And I find myself trying to make too many final decisions instead of just letting language happen, as it does in those other places. In terms of editing, I think, just like what Franny said, preserving musicality. Editing is a lot louder than writing is more silent and just trying to improvise, and editing is a lot of saying it out loud, to see how it hits the air. Even when it's not a poem that I imagine reading out loud, being able to hear helps me make my way through the poem, I think. And just like, being really, I think like it takes time. I think there's a poem today that like I was editing today where like it started off as like this really cacophonic, like visual, like big thing, like when I was in grad school, like years ago, and then put it down for a long time, took it back up, and it's like slowly, it's whittled its way down to like one little like prose part and then a couple of lines, So I think being able to realize that sometimes like sometimes you write 3 pages so you can get 2 lines, you know? And so being really unprecious with it is just a thing that I understand. And I just have to keep on asking myself, like, you know, what does this poem want? And I think the more, I don't understand that a lot of the time. And so sometimes the more I ask that, the more I realize that, like, actually I just wrote a whole bunch of shit so I could get to like the 6 lines in the middle, you know? And then I can either just keep those 6 lines in the middle, maybe that's the poem, or start from there. And, you know, see what happens when I center that, or I start with that and let the rest of the poem fall. Yeah, that's it.
What's that? What's that?
Thank you both. For the benefit of our viewers, I'm gonna skip over questions that were already answered during the discussion. So we have one from Brian. It says, Franny, I love your poem so much. You mentioned earlier about cultivating hope as practice and working to a place of hope through despair. What kind of poems are you learning to write now? And a related question from Amelia, where are you finding hope in big or small ways these days?
I don't know. It has been hard. I'm gonna be totally honest. It's been hard for me recently. I think that, like, not to get too I don't know, religious or something about it, but I think that what I've been finding hope in is understanding that, like, every minute of my life is my life, you know? Maybe that's like zooming out way too much, but just to be like whatever this life is, that is the life that I've lived, you know, that this is my life. I'm like just kind of keeping coming back to the moment, staying back in the moment, and like returning to my breath, honestly. Yeah, it's not really like it's not a hope as in like I hope that, a way of hoping that things will get better, but just like a hope that exists in saying, like, I am here now, and that is like, this is the moment that we're in now, and we literally can't predict the next one. And so, like, let's, if nothing else, stay in this moment. Yeah, and also I would say art, you know, like, I think I will feel like, okay, like everything is fucked and everything is hopeless, and there is no way out, and then I'll go to a museum and just like cry, and or watch a beautiful movie and cry, and that's like when, like, the ability to kind of like come back to myself is the thing that I think gives me hope. Yeah. Denez, I think that there's also, I'm seeing this question that Shady sent us.
Oh,
You're having the same kind of despair and hope that Franny's discussed. If is that hope a shared intrinsic quality between the two of you, or do you feel that hope was inspired by Franny?
I think I think one, yes, the hope was inspired by Franny. But two, I do think I think as different a poets as me and Franny are, where our craft definitely does touch. I mean, and it touches in a lot of ways. I think you can't spend like as many years as we did just like talking all the time without maybe moving closer, you know, moving into the same brain sometimes. But I think it's like yeah, I think the poem, and I think the reason it's after June Jordan is June Jordan has several poems where, like, at the end of it, she just says stop, right? And there's something else after. And I want to call that like a Jordanian form of some kind, where it's just like the poet very much having to like remind themselves that there must be hope, especially within this work. And yeah, I think that's a thing in all my work. I don't know. I go to some dark places, and I think hope is always a destination or an arrow that I'm interested in pointing to, you know, and I think that's complicated, and it can be. And I think there are, like, you know, uses of joy that aren't always as successful. But I think for me, yeah, hope is it at the end of the day.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
know, yeah, in
I
all
would
my
say,
life, not even just in poetry. Like, if I don't have hope, I don't know what I have. I don't know, you know.
yeah, I mean, yeah, Right. And I think I'll also just add that, like, I think it's probably more accurate to say that I was inspired by you. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I remember talking to like a youth poet like maybe 8 years ago, and that this youth poet saying, this is the thing about Danez Smith's poem is that like all of the joy, like they write joyful poems, but it's not an empty joy. It's all at a cost, or at like um it's like weighted by grief, and that's what makes it great. And I was like, yeah, youth poet, like you're totally right. And I think that like remembering the kind of that like moment in this young poet's face as they were talking about why they loved your poem so much, I think that is like the thing that I've been like, I don't know, yeah, I've been chasing and I've been learning from for years.
Well, you're an epigraph in my next book, so.
What? Is it just
So,
me being like, oh my God, you look
loop,
so
you know?
hot in those pants?
No, LOL. No, it's just like, I think that's how inspiration works, especially within long artistic friendships and relationships. It's just that like, you pick up things and you continue to help each other flourish your entire life. So even if I first inspired you, you continue to inspire me. And I hope to get to do that dance with you forever until we're dirt.
Till we're dirt.
I will have missed your is.
Oh my God.
I want to get that tattooed. Very good line, Franny.
Embarrassment of being quoted back to myself.
Your friendship is so beautiful. I hope, hope one day me and my homies can be kikiing on the live sometime down the future.
It could happen tonight.
Hey,
where they at? Invite them in. Come on, shit. Actually, not too long. I got to the airport actually.
So we've got. Let's take one more question then from Noctis Luz. I think this is a great question. What helps you work at the edges of your imagination?
Ooh.
Great question. I feel like whoever has an answer for it should just jump in. Edges of my imagination.
I mean, I think it's back to that craft thing for me, back to like getting to where the veil is thin, right? Like early, whatever it is, like whatever that means to you, it just means like, where am I least judgmental and hesitant with myself and where I can go. And so I think that's about like finding the right time of day, the right mechanics, meaning how you're writing. Maybe it's location, maybe it's, make it. Yeah, I think like, I don't know. I know for me, it's like, there's also external things that I can't really control, but I'm grateful for. Like when I am well loved, I'm able to go deeper into my imagination, right? When I am well fed, when I feel safe and peace, right? Because then in the times when that's in danger, when I'm reacting from anger or rage or depression, the edge of my imagination, I think, becomes a lot more urgent and tangible, and it needs to be, right? Whereas like when I am safe, the edge of my imagination is able to go places that don't feel necessary for my survival, right? And so when I am cared for, and when I am caring for myself, I'm able to reach a little bit further beyond the needs of survival, and that really tends to take me to like some delicious places. And also then I try to, that I think every time I make it out to that edge, I think it's an attempt, right? We're all trying to stretch there. And every time I almost touch the hem of its garment or something like that, I'm able to come back a little bit more, remember, I think the life of the poet is like trying to like really wear down that path so that way you can get back to the edge of that imagination easier and easier. And I think I get there easier now because my life, thankfully, at least at the moment, is more stable. And I'm in my good mind, and I hope to continue to wear down that path, or like, make it more visible even for myself as I continue to grow and get old.
Wow, that is such a moving answer to me. And like I love that, because it also is like that it just brings home that like in order to have I don't know, good art like that also is about taking seriously an ethics of care for artists, and like taking seriously that like artists are people who need to feel safe. But and also as your friend, I love that. But I and yeah, plus one. I guess maybe I would just add like also reading and absorbing art that is really different from me and what I'm up to. Kind of like seeing things that are really like alien to my own poetics or my own like craft practice, even stuff I hate specifically, like stuff that I'm like really not about. I feel like makes me actually a better. This is like a very professory. This is like Professor Choi's answer. Like you gotta do the reading because even if you hate it, you gotta do it because you'll learn from it. But I say it in class because I truly believe it for my own practice. Yeah.
I think that's smart. I mean, to bring in a sports reference, I think it's almost like a little alley-oop that you're saying, right? Like, to do the reading or whatever the text is, right? Even going to the museum, right? Like, I know for me, like visual art can be a major trigger, right? And so sometimes I don't know where my imagination can go, but I look and see something spectacular or mind-boggling that somebody has put on the wall, and that's just the alley-oop, right? They sent me the pass, and I can dunk it into my own, poem now. But I needed that assist from somebody else's creativity to be able to see where the edge is.
Wow, I love that, and I love learning that alley-oop is not just like a thing that someone says when I don't know. To me, it just seems like an onomatopoeia of somebody going alley-oop.
No, it's when you toss it to somebody and then they shoot it or like dunk it at like off the pass, right?
Amazing. This is learning.
So, I love you.
Have me cracking up in the sidelines. Well, wonderful. Thank you both so much for joining me this evening. All of our viewers are so grateful and sending lots of hearts and love and thank yous. I'm deeply appreciative that I got to be witness to your conversation and to your reading. So thank you for joining us over here at Lost City Books. For those viewers who maybe didn't get their questions answered right away, where can they send their fan mail for each of you? Or
oh Lord,
not to beleaguer you two as poets, but
it's all good. I'm on Twitter. I spend a lot of time there, so I was trying to spend a little less. At Danez DANEZ _SMIF Smith.
I am mostly not really on Twitter, and I don't read my Instagram DMs, but there's contact information that's listed on my website if you need to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again so much, and thank you to our viewers for watching tonight. Your lively presence in the chat was very encouraging and heartwarming. If you don't yet have your copy of the book, you can go to lostcitybookstore.com and order your copy of the book. We have a bunch in store, as well as some very special signed book plates from Franny. So those are in limited supply. So if you haven't gotten your book with a signed book plate yet, grab one now, because those are limited. Although I'm sure if I ask really nicely, maybe Franny will send some more. Other than that, give us a like and subscribe here on YouTube, and follow Lost City Books on all of our social media. We're at Lost City Books everywhere. Check out our website. We have an events calendar for all of our upcoming events, which will all be live streamed, even if they're in person. So you can catch some really cool authors appearing at Lost City Books in the future. Also, if you're seeking honey and want to have a little meet cute at a bookstore, we do have an upcoming event on February 14th, Lost City Books Date Night, featuring live music and comedy and books, of course, and wine and refreshments and special herbal gifts from our neighbors. So we hope to see you there. Franny and Danez, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure to meet you both.
Hey, pleasure to meet you. I'll be at Lost City Books cheating on my spouse, I think. That's fun. They'll come too. They'll cheat on me too. It's fine.
Bring your platonic friends as well.
There you go. There you go.
Shady, thank you so much for holding this space, and thank you everybody for being here. It means so much to me to get to share this book with you and to have the opportunity to read poems with you all. And thank you, Danez. I love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you, Shady. Thank you, Franny. Everybody go get this book. All right. I need to catch a plane. All right.
Yeah, go get your plane. Okay. Bye.
Let's
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.